Yeah, EMG is really interesting because a lot of people look to EMG as an indicator of how effectively you're producing force, right? So, the more EMG amplitude or more EMG activity you produce, the better you're doing. Say more is better. And my philosophy has always been no, more is not better. Better is better. And so with EMG in particular, people look at EMG and they say, wow, look, my EMG amplitude is higher here, so I must be doing so much better. But here's the problem. EMG amplitude could go up for any number of reasons. For example, fatigue, right? As you're fatiguing, your EMG amplitude increases because the system has to drive the muscles harder and harder and harder, despite the fact that their ability to generate force is going down. So your EMG activity goes up, but your force production goes down. So you can't use EMG as a marker of performance because you're just fatiguing.
But
More
if you had force and EMG and speed, could you do that?
Sure, but then what you're doing is you're correlating the change in EMG with the change in force output and velocity, right? So, but the point is, you can't look at the EMG signal and say, well, the EMG amplitude's going up, so everything's cool. No, you're fatiguing, like things are getting worse, not better. But more specific to efficiency, another thing that can cause an EMG amplitude to go up is antagonistic co-contraction, right? So if I just do a biceps curl, if my biceps are firing, but my triceps are also firing, now my biceps are working against my triceps while I'm trying to flex my elbow. So what's going to happen? The system's going to try to drive the agonist more, which means EMG amplitude in the biceps is going to increase, but it's not an indication of improved performance or efficiency. It's actually an indication of inefficiency because it's working harder against something that's opposing it. So this is why when we talk about contracting more muscles and tightening this area and tightening that area, all we're doing is working against ourselves. And the agonist musculature, that musculature which is responsible for producing the movement, is being overworked because it's being opposed by all these other muscle groups that are tightening, which you don't need to be doing. And so you see an increase in EMG, which is not good in this case.
Is correlation equal causation though?
No, I mean, correlation just means that things are varying the same way. It's not one thing is causing another, right? So, that's a statistical thing. But yeah, so what I try to think about, I mean, and there's so many examples of like this inefficient co-contractile activity, like doing a squat on a BOSU, which people love to do, but it is, all you're doing is co-contracting everywhere while you're doing it, right? So you're on a labile surface, you're on an unstable surface. So what does the system have to do to produce stability when you're in an unstable environment? It just tightens up all the muscles around all the joints. So now it's doing that in order to try to stabilize you, but at the same time you're trying to do a squat. So you're trying to stabilize the joint systems, but move the joint systems simultaneously. How do you do that? And what happens is you end up fighting yourself, which is why people are wobbling all over the place. It's not because they're imbalanced and unstable. It's because they're in an environment which is diametrically opposing. You're trying to move and stabilize at the same time.